interesting discussion.
Do you usually introduce Coptic along with the hieroglyphs traditionally, or is that kind of for this course?
That is definitely for this course. Not at all. In fact, most Egyptologists, I would bet that most Egyptologists cannot read Coptic. And I hedge that statement a little bit because because I'm saying this like publicly and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's fairly safe to say that most professional Egyptologists cannot read Coptic. I think that's probably an accurate statement. If it's not, it's darn close to it. It's, 51% can or something, because it's just not the thing that most people do. And the way people learn hieroglyphs, even at like the graduate level, most Egyptologists are not language specialists. So they might take, 2 or 4 semesters of Middle Egyptian and be able to read things on inscriptions and kind of have a good familiarity with how the language and script works that they can then take with them and put to use in the other things they do. So for instance, people who study art history will reference the hieroglyphic content of art pieces because they've had plenty of experience with the language and they have a kind of a working knowledge about the language. But really most Egyptologists are not sitting down and reading ancient Egyptian texts regularly. And that's already kind of a niche subfield of Egyptology, which is really an umbrella term for anything having to do with ancient Egypt, and even extending into like pre-modern Egypt, like the medieval Islamic period and things like that. So it's quite a broad field, and it's made up of lots of different subfields that are sort of they sort of have different personalities. Like as we all know from like our experience in the world, there are art people and there are math people, and there are plenty of people who are math people and art people at the same time. And you can be any kind of thing you want to be, but as a general rule, people kind of gravitate towards their sort of personal styles of subjects. And Egyptology is no different. So because it's this umbrella term or this umbrella discipline, there are lots of different sort of personality groups within Egyptology. And people who are really into languages and linguistics are kind of a minority within that larger group. So to become an Egyptologist, you have to take some Egyptian. Most people will take Middle Egyptian because that's where things usually start. And that generally, if you're going to go, be an archaeologist and you want to dig for ancient things, you need to know a lot about history. You need to know how to identify things that you find, but you don't necessarily need to be able to read any given Egyptian text, completely cold. So a lot of people who study Egyptology don't go on to look at, Old Egyptian, Late Egyptian. Almost nobody studies Demotic, and then Coptic. Most people don't really engage with those things very heavily. So yeah, and I say this cautiously because I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging anyone's knowledge, which is, of course, is not what I'm doing. But I guess what I'm trying to say is to engage with the language in this way is a thing that I'm doing as an experiment. So this class is itself an experiment in how we study this subject and how to introduce people to this subject. So I've long felt that Middle Egyptian is not the best starting point for this subject. The reason that people who study Egyptology generally start with Middle Egyptian is because it was the script of ancient Egypt in the way that Latin was the script and language of the Roman Empire, and then of various medieval, kingdoms and fiefdoms and things all the way up until the modern era. So Latin was still being used in universities in England 200 years ago, maybe a little longer, but roughly something like that, right? So people weren't speaking Latin every day, but they were hearing it in church and they were using it in universities. Middle Egyptian is very much like that. It went on being used long after it stopped being the spoken language of ancient Egypt. So that's where people start, just because it has such a broad coverage. So if you study Middle Egyptian, you can find a hieroglyphic text from the Saite period, and it will probably be written, if it's carved into stone, it will be written in Middle Egyptian. So you get a lot of coverage out of that. The problem with Middle Egyptian is that no one can agree on exactly how it works. So when you're new to a subject, you usually want to get kind of your feet on the ground before you start learning about all of the intricate scholarly debates. Yeah, some interesting comments here. So yeah, so you want to get your feet on the ground. You want to get a sense of the language, and then if you're really interested, if it grabs you, then you can go learn about, like, this person thinks this and that person thinks that, and you can kind of engage with those debates in a way that is interesting. New students of Middle Egyptian really don't want that. You don't want to get 5 different answers to your question. You kind of want to get one answer to your question. And that's how it normally works. When Middle Egyptian is taught, it's kind of taught a single given way. And then you, after you learn it, you start to learn, well, a lot of people think that that's not the correct paradigm. We should be understanding all of those things in this different way or whatever. It's just a very confusing place to start. And you're in this position where you either have to just bombard new students with way more information than they care to learn about, which is what one of my professors did, or you have to teach them a very specific model of understanding it, which is what another of my professors did. And you're forced to make that choice. With Late Egyptian, we're not forced to make any difficult choices. I can just teach you Late Egyptian. You can read the text in Late Egyptian. We can, pretty much anyone who knows anything about this language can agree that what we've decided is reasonably correct 99% of the way, with a minor wrinkle here and there because it is a very old language. So I have very long believed that we should be starting people with Late Egyptian. In fact, a lot of other Egyptologists I know have kind of echoed the same point. They've argued for really everybody should start with Coptic, because we know Coptic. Coptic could be used as a language right now. People who know Coptic well enough could communicate in it. There's even sort of a theoretical situation where if I were to meet someone who had studied Coptic and we didn't have any other language in common, we could probably get by sort of struggling, but communicating in Coptic reasonably well. So I've heard a lot of people say that that's where we should start, and I totally agree. There's a problem with starting people on Coptic, and you might be able to guess what it is. Does anybody want to try to guess? What's the problem with starting with Coptic? Kevin, go for it. You have to unmute yourself. I muted everyone.
It's not as interesting. It's not as compelling as hieroglyphs. So no one's going to be interested in it.
Nobody's interested. What the hell is Coptic? I mean, nobody know. If you haven't studied any Egyptological thing before, or if you're not a member of the Coptic Orthodox Church, which is a lot of people, it's probably 16 to 20 million people total, but pretty small minority of the Earth's population. There's nothing interesting about Coptic if you're coming to it totally cold. It just doesn't reach out and grab people. People want to learn hieroglyphs. So that's, I don't know if I've said this before or not, but if I haven't, it's definitely good that you asked that question, because I'll keep it in the video, and I should have, it's not sexy. Yeah, good. There's a comment too. Coptic is not sexy. I think Coptic is very sexy. I think it's the sexiest language there is. It's like, I mean, people think French is sexy, and I don't know. I mean, it is, I would agree, but Coptic is way sexier than French. It has a lot of things in common with it, actually. So anyway, this is a thing I should have said before, and it doesn't hurt to say it again, just to explain, like, the reason the class is the way that it is. It's kind of a compromise. So Late Egyptian we know, and we can teach it just as we would teach just about any other language. I can tell you what things are, and you can just take my word for it, and that I won't steer you wrong that way. Middle Egyptian, we don't have that luxury, but at the same time, it has hieroglyphs in it. So I kind of see it as the compromise between those two extremes. Like, you know, we start with Middle Egyptian because you can read the most stuff, but we don't actually know for sure how to read the language. I mean, if you ask one person, there are probably several people who would say, oh yes, we know exactly how to read Middle Egyptian. But then if you ask another person who thinks that, they'll tell you, oh no, that guy doesn't have a clue, but I know how to read Middle Egyptian. We don't have that problem with Late Egyptian. We can read it. Coptic is really best, but then, you know, Coptic doesn't attract people. So yeah, here we are in Late Egyptian. There are some really awesome texts in Late Egyptian that we can read. There are some stories, which is what I always go for first. There are some Late Egyptian stories that have all of the literary qualities of like stories from 1001 Nights or Grimm's fairy tales. They're very much like stories that are meant to be told and enjoyed, and they're quite entertaining. And we have those in Late Egyptian. So there's plenty of cool stuff for us to read. It's not going to get you as quickly to the reading comprehension of things like offering formulas and you know, things that kings carve into stone on the front of buildings. We're going to get there more slowly, but before we get there, there's lots of cool stuff to read. You'll be able to understand the language perfectly. And if you read all these stories in Late Egyptian and then go learn Middle Egyptian, it will be a breeze because you'll already know the language. And then the fact that it's older and there's things that we don't know, and it's like, is this grammatical construction meant to be this thing or that thing? You'll engage with it the same way that like a native speaker of English like me would engage with Anglo-Saxon, where it's like, yeah, this is weird, it's totally different, but I actually have a lot of the foundation in place that allows me to grasp this subject really quickly. So yeah, it's a bit long-winded. Sorry, this is a super long answer to your question, but it's something that I definitely should have said before. That is the holistic explanation of why this course is organized the way it is. And then there's a bunch of other things in addition to that that you could probably derive on your own, like why don't we have a textbook? Why am I kind of like writing the textbook as we're going? Well, it's because there isn't a textbook, because students are always started with Middle Egyptian, and I'm kind of testing the idea that people would enjoy the subject a lot more and have an easier introduction if they started with Late Egyptian. So I'm making an Intro to Late Egyptian textbook that people could use for self-study. And then those two things are intertwined. Like the class is, in a way, the class is my approach to like self-discipline with textbook writing, because I have to write it because you guys are showing up every Saturday. And that's, you know, I've learned in my life that if you can create an environment that encourages you to slowly but steadily get work done, you can accomplish a lot of things. But without creating that environment, it can be very difficult to just sit down and write an Introduction to Late Egyptian Self-Study textbook, because it's a big task and there are plenty of other things to do. So yeah, okay, so that's, again, that will go in the video. So that is part of the class, me explaining all of that. But I think since I spent so much time on that, I'm just going to jump straight into where we were before. So we were going through the uniliteral vocabulary. And as someone asked on Discord, yes, these are vocabulary words that you should try to learn. There's a Quizlet. I think I put a link to the Quizlet in this thing. Where did I put it? It was in the materials, I thought. That's up. Oh man, I would swear. Okay, yeah, vocabulary flashcards. So if you go to this link, you have a nice Quizlet that you can use, and it has all the flashcards. And I think you can download them and, you know, format them according to your liking and all that kind of stuff. Pretty sure you can download like a CSV that you can then, you know, use to make whatever study tools you want. Someone asked about printing flashcards, which is something that I do know about because I was making flashcards before the iPhone, before there were flashcard apps. And the way I would do it is, I think originally it was a C++ program, but I think now it's a Python program that creates a LaTeX document that formats things according to the standard Avery printable business card sheets. So you can find these. You could use these ones, but I think they're kind of expensive. I think if you go on Amazon, you can get a box of 1,000 of these for like $20. And I would actually like run this program, compile the document, and then print out, you know, just like hundreds and hundreds of pages of flashcards, and then prip them out, which I learned thanks to Discord is not a normal English verb, apparently. Wait, do I have any other native English speakers here? Does your dialect say prip when you like, Peter? You say prip? Okay, it's not just me.
No, I say print.
I've never heard prip before.
Prip, P-R-I-P, like when you have like a perforated cardstock or something and you go like, it goes prip, prip,
Yeah,
prip.
when you say that, it makes perfect sense. It's onomatopoeic, but I've never heard that before. It's
It
amazing.
must be like a Texas phrase or something that I didn't even know was still in there. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to make flashcards in that way, that's the most efficient way I know, and I did try lots of different ways, so it's probably a good guess. But there's also like, I think Quizlet has an app, and there's also like little games and stuff, so it's quite good. So yeah, you should be learning these. Last time we took turns transcribing them and then talking about the Coptic and talking about how you kind of relate the late Egyptian hieroglyphic writing and then the Egyptological pronunciation to the Coptic, and how you kind of derive the reconstructed pronunciation of late Egyptian from that. That is a very, very big topic. It takes a long time to learn. So I'll just reemphasize here. In this activity, you are not expected to sort of perfectly learn the reconstruction of late Egyptian. What's happening instead is that I'm just providing you with a whole bunch of input so that you can start like inferring the rules that would be used to do that generally. And then hopefully by the time we're finished with this course, you will be able to do that on your own, or at least if I show you a reconstruction, you'll be able to verify that it's sensible and all those things. So that's just a quick recap of what we're doing, and I think we should get started before we run out of time. So do I have any volunteers who would like to answer some of them? Oh, I see Peter's hand up in real life. Peter.
I use the digital hand too much, so I figured I'd use my real hand.
You can use your real hand too. I could see you, so that worked out. Yeah, what's this guy?
So that looks like, I guess the nearest I could pronounce it would be eh.
Yeah.
So it's an I and a emphatic H.
Yeah.
I was wondering about the Gardner codes for the bull and the phallus. Is there a stage in your learning process where you just kind of get, okay, that's an A9?
That's probably D class, D50 or 51 or something like that.
See, that's awesome, Mustafa. Nice job.
Actually,
the phallus.
actually, D50, as I remember, but I'm not sure actually remember.
Okay.
Though.
I don't know all the Gardner sign codes.
I'm going off the rails here, but it's like if I want to replicate this on my own in like J-Sesh or something like that, I would have to know that and look that up. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
I want to
Yes
take
and
it
no.
one.
Yeah.
Yes and no. So
JSS, you can write
so much
eh,
useful
and
things
it'll fill it
come
in.
with
There you go.
so much useful thing come with the Gardner code in GSesh.
yeah,
Wow, okay.
I don't know all the Gardner sign codes. I have like kind of my way of doing it. And I'll tell you my way right now. Oh, I've got something else about Prip. Sorry, if you send if you send something in the chat and I see it later, I apologize. It's kind of hard to see everything at the same time. Okay, so in answer to your question, Peter, you don't need to memorize all the Gardner sign codes. I think it would be kind of cool to do that. I have a friend who was he was a grad student at Liège. He might have finished his PhD. I'm not sure. I haven't asked him lately. But he was working on the Thought Sign List project. And he knew all of the Gardner sign codes from working on that project. And I thought that was just awesome. I was like, oh man, you're so cool right now. You're so much cooler than me. But most people probably don't. And the way I do it usually is I know that bull can also be e or ka. And the one that comes to mind for me is ka. So ka is going to give you the standard ka sign, probably a ka on a stick sign, and then bull. And then there's bull with his head down. Yeah, so you can cycle through them that way by hitting the space bar. That works either in the Unicode keyboard or in JSesh. For the Unicode keyboard, I actually just like opened up the code for JSesh and just copied all of the sign sequences. So they work identically. And then for the ejaculating phallus, or we can say penis, I think that's fine. It's ba, so B, aleph, second H. Because it's in the phrase mbach. And so I normally type them by knowing things like that. And they're kind of abstract. This, I think, is wedpoo, is that jar, the wine jar or beer jar. But yeah, just from experience, you pick those things up and you kind of learn how to type them in. Let me get a JSesh window here. It works really similarly, but it's even easier in JSesh because if you didn't know one, my Arabic keyboard should work exactly the same way. Yeah, it's pretty similar. Signs are slightly different. So yeah, you cycle through them with the spacebar, but in JSesh you also have the sign lookup tool. And I use this to look up signs. They're all sorted by the Gardner sign code categories. So if it's a bull, obviously it's going to be in here somewhere. It is E1, which is actually what I thought it was, but I think I tried that and didn't get it, but whatever. And then it gives you phonetic values here.
Nice.
So I normally, if I have to look something up, I memorize this one because I find that much more intuitive than the Gardner sign codes. So I don't really know all the Gardner sign codes. So, yeah, that's a good question. That's how you would go about that. Notes on determinatives, that's a bull, obviously. And then this, as you correctly identified, that is a phallus, or I think we can just say penis because it's not, the 19th century anymore, or the 20th. And that sign is everybody's favorite because, it's just always fun and kind of funny that there's just a penis in the hieroglyphs. You'll see it in plenty of contexts that have nothing to do with Egyptian language. There's two things about this that I think are really fun. One, the ancient Egyptians were not prudish at all. If you read Egyptian texts, they are very blunt about like the ways that they describe sexual activity is like the way your buddy would describe something at a bar. They are like they do not sugarcoat anything. They just say it very, very frankly. So and we know from other things like the creation of the world involved Atum masturbating because he was the only god. So, he was just sitting on his island alone for eons and, anybody can guess what's going to happen. And then he created all the other gods that way, which is, I don't think anybody guessed that part. But yeah, so.
From what I've seen, he also did a blowjob on himself.
Oh, he filleted himself.
Yeah, and the sperm he spit out become the Nile.
Yeah, there's one version where he spits out Shu and Tefnut from his mouth. I always interpreted that story as being like, I don't know. So in some way, semen gets into his mouth. I always assumed he just had good aim. I don't know. I'm sorry, everyone. But didn't realize it before, but apparently that's how I imagined it. But whatever he did, yeah. So these stories were a part of creation myths. They were a part of formalized religion. And if you read a bunch of Egyptian texts, you will find plenty of mentions of like sexual activity that are not in any way euphemized at all. They just tell it like it is. So that's one thing to get used to with Egyptian language and reading Egyptian texts is just, you have to kind of get over our culture's prudishness about these things because they just really didn't have that, which I find quite refreshing personally. Because it was, to them, it was just like, this is, I mean, hieroglyphs are just objects that exist in the world that you see every day. And, you know, penis is one of those things for most people. So there you go. The other thing is that this, I always show this. This is one of the, there's a biliteral that is a penis that will come up in the next chapter. And in my classes at Brown for the summer program, I would show all these biliterals to students. And I would go one by one, like asking them to guess what the sign is a picture of. And they would come up with the most elaborate guesses. Even when they were wrong, they would come up with something. And then every single time when we got to this sign, nobody could guess. Nobody had any guesses. Nobody had any clue what it was. And I would have to be like, it's what you think it is. And finally, some brave student would be like, is it a penis? And I'd be like, yes, that's what it is. And that was my way of getting those students over kind of our shyness, because in our culture, it's not really polite to bring these things up, but we're dealing with the Egyptian language and it just doesn't abide by those same norms. So you kind of have to just get over that. Question in the comments, is bull symbol of virility, fertility, hence the penis sign? Yes, so the bull is commonly used. It's associated with pharaohs who have a lot of associations with different symbols of virility because that's sort of part of their role. They're meant to be very productive. They need to have lots of children for political reasons, and that's all connected. Also, most male animals will have a penis with them, especially in this case where it's the masculine and feminine are very similar. That's just a way of saying it's a male animal. The word husband also has it in there. So, you know, like I said, they're just not shy about telling you what's up. Peter, do you have any other questions about this word?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Okay, that's a lot of stuff on that one word. What about this one?
I think one of the titles of the pharaoh. Go ahead, Emmanuel.
It's because I see that they use the ejaculating penis for male, but why they don't have any kind of sign for female as well?
Well, it's been suggested that they do. So, oops, sorry.
Right. I was going to say that isn't Hemet the symbol for wife or mother that has the genitalia right there too?
Yeah, there's been arguments that it's sort of a feminine triangle, which you'll see on any Egyptian figures that show nude women. They'll always have like a very sharply defined like pubic triangle. So it's been argued that it's related to that. It's been argued that it's a sort of a vessel, that's sort of a womb-like symbol. I don't really find any of those compelling. Let me get another one of these. The one that Alan uses actually has a little dash in it that makes it sort of look like frontal nudity of a woman, but I don't know. You kind of have to use your imagination a bit, which, you know, most people are pretty good at doing when it comes to things like that. But yeah, it's up to you to decide whether they have a feminine thing. But also, like, penises are quite visible. I mean, you're talking about a society where people probably would have, like, they would have bathed naked in the river that in a way that would have been in plain view of anyone who happened to be walking by. These things were just not hidden.
Right.
So yeah.
And isn't one of the titles of the pharaoh bull of his mother or something like that? Sometimes
there's a particular name, I forget which one. It's like the second or third name that's often something to do with a bull. Like Connacht is used all the time, like a mighty bull, things like it's a common symbol.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
So much. I mean, like, how are we ever going to get through this list? There's so much to talk about with every single word.
Okay, so this one is similar. Let's see. I had this one as I emphatic HT.
Yeah. Which we could say is ehet if we wanted to do the Egyptological.
Yeah.
It's quite
and then
close.
The Coptic is ehe.
Ehe. Yeah.
Ehe or
ehe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
cool.
aha. And it's pretty close. So we can guess that this was probably had an initial glottal stop. It has a probably I don't know what vowel would go there to get a stressed epsilon. Probably an oo. So it's probably something like, I'm sorry, what was that, Aurelio?
Same thing, probably uchet or something like this.
Yeah, that would be my guess. So probably something like uhet with the unreleased T, then becomes uhe, and then, you know, the U changed to e, and then the pharyngeal becomes just a glottal. So there you go, pretty short path between the late Egyptian and the Coptic. But something else we can do here, this word for bull doesn't actually survive in the Coptic, but we can guess what it would have been. You want to try to guess, Peter?
So maybe it would just be eh.
Yeah.
So like with the cow, it's ehe, probably with the T. With the bull, it's probably just ehe, or something like that.
I think it'd probably just be, I think it'd just be this.
Yeah, right. Eh.
Yeah, yeah. We don't know, we don't have any evidence for that, but that's probably a good guess. And then this next word, it's related. What do you have for
There is
this?
no component, actually. There is no version of Coptic ihu, as I know. Something like there is no similar things, the other ones.
Yeah, I don't know
Coptic.
one.
As I know, there is a word, lean word from Greek, is kelistra or something like that.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Peter, what do you have for the transcription of this one?
Okay, so I have I emphatic HW.
Yeah.
So that would be ehu or something like that in
Yeah.
Egyptological. What
Yeah,
was the Coptic word
say
for stable? Is there no relationship there, or?
Coptic word for stable. The thing that pops to mind is Monwom is like what is the Coptic word for stable? Is it apotheke? Is that it? Aurelio, what's the Coptic word for stable? Oh, kelistra. They use the Greek. Okay. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what the Coptic word for stable is. I'll have to look it up. Okay, you want to do one more? Oh, and the point of this, putting these three together, is to show that
sure,
the way you can derive related meanings.
Stable.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, and it's like this has the house plan determinative. So this is like just a simple house viewed from above. So, you know, open doorway, kind of like a floor plan of a house today. And yeah, we have bull, it's the animal itself, and then it's the masculine version. Ihet cow, we get the animal classifier, and then ihu stable, it's a building. And they're all, you know, related. Yeah, there's just a set of three that show you kind of how these consonantal relationships work.
Mistranslated. Actually, ihu stable word, as I understand, is a little bit mistranslated because ih means cow, but stable is mostly used for a place for the horses.
Fair point. Yeah. So cowshed, I guess.
I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's something like maybe barn.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
I made
you.
it cowshed.
Awesome.
I think that's good.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know that it is in dictionary it's said stable, but
yeah, but this is my book. I can say I think you're right, so I'm just going to change it. I mean, the book is still being written, so I've got time to change it. Might as well change it to the correct thing. Yeah, cowshed sounds right to me. Ihu. Okay.
Thank you.
Peter, do you want to do one more? Do you want to do one more?
Sure.
Okay, let's do one more.
So I think that's ech. So that's the other H, the smiley H, which I love your, what is
Happy
that?
H.
That's the one.
Yeah, this
I love
is
that association. That's great.
So there's a silent H or quiet H, and then surprised H. One of my students made this up, but I think it's great because it's like someone going like with like a round mouth because surprised, and then happy H, and then the last one is contented H because it's just someone with like a flat mouth.
Right.
I think I called it bemused H, and he was like, nobody knows what bemused means. Just call it contented. And I was like, okay, fine.
Awesome.
All right. Well done, Peter.
Thank you.
So anybody else want to do some of these? We've got quite a few more.
Yeah.
Who's the first person who spoke up?
Yeah,
George.
me.
Okay.
Okay.
Mustafa, you'll be after George, okay? Because I think you were
Okay,
just
okay, no
behind him.
problem.
All right.
Not
So
problem.
this would be, would it be Icar, IQR?
Yeah. And we don't have the Coptic. We can make it up. If I wanted to make it up, I would probably make, I don't really know what to make up for this, to be honest, but I'd probably something like okay. Although that actually looks like
Logical.
So these
reasonably
literally
logical.
these are literally the Coptic words
Yeah,
for that, what that is.
these are the real Coptic words. And you can see that some of them are missing. This one's missing, this one's missing.
Right.
In the previous case, this one was missing, but I mean, we have somewhere 70% really are still the same. It's pretty remarkable.
Wow.
How close Late Egyptian and Coptic really are. There are some differences, and those differences are important, but there's quite a lot.
And a lot of these are the same in Middle Egyptian, it seems, or very similar.
They are.
Like Icar is the same in Middle Egyptian.
Yeah, well, there's this thing where the words here that we don't have Coptic for are often the words that are similar in Middle Egyptian. So these words in Late Egyptian are kind of on their way out, and that's why we don't have them in Coptic. So there's much less overlap with Middle Egyptian and Coptic because the most common words generally don't survive. Like, for example, the word ib for heart is getting replaced in Late Egyptian with the word hati for heart. Hati survives into Coptic as hate, so we know that it was probably something like hutta or something like that, reconstructed in Late Egyptian, but it supplants ib entirely. So ib doesn't really survive into Coptic at all.
So for barley, is it just, is that a determinative at the end?
It is, yeah. It's three little seedling things.
Then next would be, so I know from Middle Egyptian that this is just it again, but there's an F there. So is it itef?
That's a question in the chat too. Is there a good explanation for this F? I don't know one. I don't know a good explanation for this. I'm sure people have tried to explain it. I've definitely looked at explanations and never seen anything that I found particularly compelling. For some reason, this word is consistently written with an F and it doesn't survive into Coptic with an F. Yeah, I don't know. And then we have this in Late Egyptian where the plural is even, it's clearly the plural is derived from the singular in a very obvious way. The F is still written in Late Egyptian, even though it's not pronounced. Right. So I think this could.
It's ITY. Is the next one ITY?
Yeah, IT, and I've been writing the double reed leaf as double I, but that's a convention that I've chosen for this book. I think I explained the reasoning for it in a previous class, so I won't go into it again. But yeah.
And then this is Itaru, ITRW.
Yeah, and this is a pretty nice derivation to look at. So the Coptic here looks a little confusing, but if you remember that EI is always just a ya type sound, those two letters always go together. Just as in English, the letters CH pretty much always go together. You'll always read them as cha, you'll never read them as C plus H. Same thing with epsilon, iota, and Coptic. They're almost always combined into one. And then there's an ah sound, and then the double ah tells us that there's actually a glottal stop in here. So this is yar.
Yeah.
And then if we want to derive that from earlier Egyptian, well, let's just roll things back a little bit. We get the A first of all, and then something has to preserve the R. So we need some kind of little short vowel. I'll just use schwa to represent that for now. And then roll that back even further. Let's see what we get. Just using a kind of a generic A here. Yeah, probably something like yatra. And then the U, as so often is the case, this U probably represents the presence of some kind of final vowel. Maybe a U-type vowel, but we don't know for sure. Oh, some good questions in the chat. Sorry, I missed this. Yeah, so these three strokes, you can see the classifier is the same, seated man, because this is just a sort of person. Father is a sort of person. And then this is called the plural strokes, and it means that it's plural. This originally derived from, in Old Egyptian, very often they would put just three classifiers in a row to show that the word was plural. So this is kind of an abbreviation of that. It's saying, basically, take this classifier, triple it. So fathers, three people.
Then why we did make it fathers plural, father plural of word it double Egyptological yod.
Yeah, probably because it had a consonantal yod on the end. It was I don't know exactly. Let's see. It would be something like.
Is that last epsilon pronounced?
It maybe more logical, but I don't know. Itu.
Is it yote?
It probably, yeah, it's definitely yode, and then probably pronounced something like Yoda, like Yoda, like from Star Wars. It sounds like that. Okay, so if we wanted to derive this, let's look at yot first of all. So this is just yot with a proper T at the end. So if we go backwards, we have A in open syllable because we have omega here that tells us this A was an open syllable, and the preservation of the T tells us that the T was not word final or it would have been lost. Egyptian was kind of like French in the way it loses all the final letters unless there's something after it to protect it. So we really need something like yacht short vowel. So like yata, presumably, or yatu, some short vowel. And then when we go to the plural, we can take this reconstruction and we can say the general way to pluralize things is just to put a consonantal W on the end. And then we can observe that sort of generally, this would be the Middle Egyptian plural, and late Egyptian, there's often this very reliable flip-flopping between consonantal W and consonantal yod. They often interchange with one another for reasons that I don't think anyone completely understands, but we have all the evidence from Semitic languages where the same thing happens. W and yod tend to be in kind of a, I forget the word. What's the word? Aurelio, you're a physicist. What's the word for like a interchangeable?
Complementary or
when a material has like two stable configurations that it kind of flips back and forth between, like a slap bracelet. There's a word for that.
Gotcha.
There's a sciencey word for that. Bistable. Thank you, Ralph.
Bistable.
Nice.
Ha.
Bistable
Okay.
is the word. Yes. Consonantal W and consonantal yod are bistable in Egyptian and in the Semitic languages. For some reason, they tend to be kind of on sort of a spectrum, and they flip back and forth. So normally the presence of a neighboring vowel, if it's like an E type vowel, it might trigger. If you had something like Iwa, that can very easily change into U, for example. So we go from having like a E type vowel and a W type consonant to having a Y type vowel and a U type, Y type consonant and a U type vowel. That thing happens a lot. A million other things can happen, but basically these things tend to switch with one another. So probably what we have for the reconstruction here is yatu, yatui, yatuya, something like that. I don't know. My pronunciation of that is terrible, but you get the idea. There's a consonantal Y on the end, and that's why it's being written here. And the presence of that consonantal Y is what keeps this final vowel from being lost. The consonant is, but the vowel is preserved, and we get it preserved in Coptic. Yoda. I know that was a little fast. As always with these reconstructions, the purpose is to give you a lot of information, and then, but you don't have to memorize all of it, right? You'll see it over and over, and it will click, and you'll kind of infer these rules. That was 3. George, do you want another one? You can have one more if you want.
Sure. This is, I guess it would be I, and then the aleph.
Yeah. I was saying yeah, but also yeah.
Yeah.
And then yeah in Coptic, or yeah. Really, this is probably would be pronounced yeah, just like English yeah. So there you go. Okay, thanks, George. Great work. Mustafa, do you want to do 4 of these?
Yeah.
No, that was the previous one. We're on the next one now.
Let me. Okay, yom. Actually, it is loan word.
It is.
Yom.
You know what language it's from?
Hebrew.
Yeah. So
but...
Hebrew proper didn't really exist. We generally say Canaanite. So Hebrew is a Canaanite language, but we don't have any Hebrew texts at the time that this word was loaned into Egyptian. So this is kind of like, this is Hebrew before it was even called Hebrew.
Phoenician. I don't know, Phoenician.
It's actually, well, I mean, Phoenician is, I think, Canaanite language too, or closely related. I'm not sure. Showing my ignorance here. I'm not sure exactly where it's classified. They're quite similar. We used to have a Phoenician reading group, and with people who people who read Arabic and Hebrew in there. They
hardcore Semitic.
Yeah, it's really fun. There's this wonderful Phoenician text that's written on a Egyptian sarcophagus. I forget the name of the text now, but if you Google it, you'll find it really easy.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know that.
Okay, anyway, so this is a loan word from Canaanite. It's obviously the same word as like the modern Hebrew word yom, that means sea. What's the transcription?
Y. U.
I've chosen to do it this way, but yeah, I mean, most people would say Y. I've chosen to always mark double read leaf with double I. Yeah. So yeah. And this is a little weird that it has a W in it. Not all writings do have that W consonant in there. But it was probably an A type vowel, and it is an A vowel in modern Hebrew. So yeah, it becomes Omicron through the vowel shift, right? This is a type vowel, stressed, enclosed syllable, so it becomes Omicron as per the usual rules. Aurelio, question.
I think the same as Peter, namely there's something going on with that extra arm glyph.
Yeah,
it could be an M, it could be a lot of, it could be together with the M itself. So yeah, what's the story, you think?
So why don't we have this? It's a very good question. The answer sucks. I hate to give you this answer. Basically, there's a sign. Let me get my hieroglyphic keyboard. There's a sign that looks like this, that is a biliteral me. And often you'll see the combination M plus me. And that's probably like so many, like we'll see later where there are bi and triliteral signs that have phonetic complements. This is probably a biliteral phonetic complement pair, but then it gets used to represent M, or in later group writing to represent M plus some vowel that we're not totally sure of. So then, because in hieratic, all of these arm type signs, like the D sign, they all get written the same way in hieratic. The distinction gradually gets lost. And so it's very frequent to see M plus arm, and it's just M. So that's kind of like a little, I'm like adding epicycles to the system of uniliteral transcription. If you see an M plus an arm, it's probably just M, but not always. Sometimes it really is M plus arm. This language is messy. It's one of the messiest languages you could ever study. So I don't apologize for the messiness. I enjoy the messiness, honestly. But I do apologize for putting this word in the uniliteral section without realizing how confusing that is, that forces you to add another rule right off the bat. You've just learned that this al means M, and you've just learned that this arm means ein. And now you have to learn that if the two of those are in sequence, the arm probably isn't really there. So yeah.
Yeah, the thing to point out maybe is that this one really has 3 determinatives at the end.
Yes. Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah, it's so there's the water, as was, Phoenician is Canaanite. Thank you, Rasmus. The water, as was mentioned earlier in the chat, That's the three N signs together are a single sign, as you can see when I highlight them. It's just a single sign. The mu sign, that means water, and that is a classifier here because C's are have water in them. This is a canal or set of canals viewed from above, and this is another set of canals viewed from above. In the chat just now, so maybe water stands for mu, so just another M. The water sign actually can be used in group writing to represent M plus U, or M plus A, I think. Don't remember for sure, but yeah, it can be used that way. In this case, it's definitely a classifier because this sequence of classifiers for like useful body of water, it's like watery thing, navigable watery thing, irrigating the fields watery thing. So yeah, they're kind of throwing all those meanings together. It's a body of water that has all of those different characteristics. So yeah, it can be classed in any of those groups. Again, we haven't discussed the determinative classifier distinction, but we will eventually, I'm sure. I mean, there's probably nothing I'm not going to talk about by the time the class is over, judging by how things are going so far. Mustafa, you want to do another?
An, ayn, and an. An.
Yep, on.
The other one is anet.
Okay.
Same. It is the other one. Actually,
yeah,
same.
And I put both of these in here to show you that this word can have either classifier. Real quick question in the chat: is there a determinative for a salty bottle for a salty body of water like C? No, there is not. The determinative used for C is also the water sign. Okay, so back to these question about determinatives / classifiers. This word can be written with both, and it's kind of fun. So like the Egyptian word for fingernail is this word ina that actually means adze. So adze, A-D-Z-E, not a very common word, but it's this tool. It's actually this thing. It's literally that thing. It's a tool that's used to like scrape out wood for woodworking. And the Egyptian word for fingernail was identical. So they didn't call them nails, they called them adzes. And because there's that sort of metaphorical relationship, like we all have little adzes on the ends of our fingers, yes, it is similar to the tool used in the opening of the mouth. The tool that you see in a lot of depictions is an adze. The other tool that you will know is that flared pesesh kef knife, that really interesting looking flint knife. So yeah, good question. Yeah, adzes are really important in Egyptian culture. So they were very skilled woodworkers. There's not a lot of usable lumber that grows natively in Egypt. So lumber very often had to be imported for large building projects. Like the bark of Amun was made out of cedar imported from Byblos in modern day Lebanon. And then a lot of the lumber that was available. Yes, thank you, Peter. That was my segue. I meant to bring that up. Yeah, that's what the story we're going to be reading is all about. It's all about traveling to Lebanon to buy cedar wood in order to bring it back to Egypt in order to build the Bark of Amun at Thebes. So for big, like, public building projects, they could import cedar. But for everyday things, obviously not everyone can afford to import the most fabulous exotic foreign wood that they can for everyday purposes. So they would use things like Acacia nilotica, which if you've seen an acacia tree, it grows, actually you can see one, oh no, it's dark. There's one right outside my window. There's a black locust tree, which is closely related, I think. They grow like very like twisty limbs that aren't very thick. So if you use them for woodworking, you have to like cut them into curved planks and then cut other planks to fit inside. So if you look at a lot of ancient Egyptian chests or coffins, they'll be made out of lots of weirdly shaped pieces of wood that are all fitted very skillfully together. So because the quality of wood available was either low or very expensive, they were very talented woodworkers, and adzes were used for all sorts of things. And it, it kind of makes sense that they would then like adopt that as a metaphorical thing to refer to fingernails, because you use fingernails in a way much like the way you would use an adze on wood. And then to refer to the thing itself, to refer to a fingernail, you could even use the adze classifier, but it could still mean fingernail. In the same way that you can say the word nails in English and not specify whether you're referring to fingernails or to nails that you hammer into wood. Yeah, so classifiers are kind of messy like that. They could keep the metaphor going, as it were, or they could spell it out. Either way, I think that's kind of neat. So that's why I put those examples in here. And well, we have 5 minutes left. Stop. Okay.
Actually, the last one. Actually. Yeah.
Okay, it's your last one. It's got to be RR, your last one. Yeah, and then this derivation. This Coptic suggests L for R sign and to manage. Oh, interesting. Pen blanks of acacia from the region are now extremely expensive. Huh. I mean, I guess it must be kind of prized. They had sycamore too, which is kind of neat. I'll tell you guys this, although I'm getting off topic again. It is one of my life goals to grow a bonsai sycamore fig tree, and I have tried and tried and tried for years. So if anyone sends me a sycamore fig filled with viable seeds, I don't know what I'll do. I'll do something really nice for you. I don't know. You kind of you can request whatever you like. If anyone happens to live in a place where sycamore figs grow and can mail me a fig with seeds in it, please do, and I will send you money or love, whatever it is you need. Okay, so back onto the subject of this. Should this be an L, basically, right? We have L's in the Coptic. Should it be an L? Yes, honestly, it should. So this letter in Egyptian is ambiguous. The way I usually explain it, if you've ever heard like someone who's a native speaker of Japanese, for example, speaking English, and they might confuse their L's and R's, because in Japanese, those two sounds are actually allophones of a single phoneme. So they're not reliably distinguished. They're distinguished by context as allophones. They will confuse those two things. We see the same thing happening in Egyptian. So when they encounter words with an L in them, we can see them struggling about how to write it. A lot of times they'll just write it as an R, because it's like, well, that's the closest sound. That's the closest letter we've got. This sometimes sounds like L. There are a few Egyptian words that are written with R's and are cognate with Semitic words that have L's and end up with L's in them in Coptic. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I know that there are such things. Oh, the word, Egyptian word, Kareb, I think, is this right? Or maybe it's just like this. I don't think I need this. Maybe I do. I think this is cognate with like Arabic, like heart. And I think it ends up, there's a form of it in Coptic that has an L. I can't think of what it is. Anyway, so we know that L existed. We know that it was an allophone of R, and we know that they use R to write L. So if we're transcribing this, can we transcribe it with L? Sure. I'm going to try to transcribe as true to what's written in Late Egyptian as possible. So I'm going to choose to use R, but then you just kind of have to know that this can represent an L type sound. Just like if you were, if you're an American English speaker learning Japanese, you have to know that those two sounds are allophones. And you probably have to get the right one in context to avoid, sounding foreign or whatever. But, in our language, they're distinct phonemes, and you just have to learn that. Yeah, it's just part of it. Okay, we have very little time left, but I'm going to ask for one more volunteer. Does anybody want to raise their hand and do a few more words before we go? Kathy, go for it.
Okay, Aru.
Aru, yeah, good. And we have the Coptic. I mean, the Coptic couldn't be more spot on. Arawi.
Arui, okay.
I think this is actually the plural, but close enough. Probably be Aro
Right.
or something. Good.
Yeah.
What is there anything else? Yeah.
Okay, Ashu.
Ashu. Yeah, and this is a good example. If you know this word from Middle Egyptian, you'll know it without the W. This is a fairly common word, even in Middle Egyptian. These W's start popping up in Late Egyptian, and we think they probably represent the presence of a final vowel, but we don't always know for sure. They could also, show that the vowel shift had already happened, possibly. It's been hypothesized that these final semi-vowels actually represent the quality of the vowel in the previous syllable, especially when they're associated with multiliterals. We don't really know for sure. But yeah, so that's just something to take note of. There's all these extra W's on the ends of words in Late Egyptian. We have another one in the next word. What do you think, Kathy?
Aku.
Aku. And yeah, it survives as a weak, which means that it had a weak consonant in here somewhere. Might have even been a W, and the W might be misplaced. This comes from a word that originally meant to enter. Ak means to enter. I think still in Late Egyptian, it means to enter, but then there's Aku means something like income, and then that gets narrowed, gets semantically narrowed to bread, because bread was, at least up to and including the Middle Kingdom, bread was the currency. All trading was done in terms of amounts of bread. Even if I were bartering something with someone else that didn't involve grain or bread, we would probably describe its value in terms of jars of bread. So if I wanted to, sell a bolt of cloth in exchange for, I don't know, what do I want? Some onions. We would probably value both of our goods in terms of bread to make sure that they were equivalent value. So yeah, so income becomes the word for bread. Kind of like in English, where you can say bread to mean money, like bread and honey. Money. Okay. Do you want to do one more, Kathy? And then I think we have to go because we're over time.
Yeah. Wea.
Yeah. Sacred bark. I'm going to change this to say boat. I just decided, because no one says the word bark except Egyptologists.
Actually, we means something like
barge.
Nubian ships.
A barge, yeah.
It's not a barge though. So the word barge, interestingly, does come from ancient Egyptian, probably from Phoenician via ancient Egyptian. So that's kind of fun. But it's not like a big flat bottom boat for river transport. It's actually the little tiny boat that's like barely, it's the size of a canoe. It's barely, or a kayak. It's barely big enough for a human to ride in. It was the boat, in the story, it's the boat that's used to transport the golden statue of the god Amun during the sacred procession, probably Opet festival, although I don't know whether the text ever specifies. But whenever the god emerged from his temple, he would be carried on a small wooden boat. Bark.
That's also the Greek word for boat. That kind of a boat is varka.
Oh, interesting.
So I wonder if it became bark, like Greek into English or French, and then back all the way
probably
back.
I would guess via French.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could keep it bark, but I just want it to be, I'm just going to say boat. It's a boat. Sacred boat. It means boat. And yeah, so that's where I was going to say a good note to end on, but I don't know why sacred boat would be a good note to end on. Maybe because you're sailing away for a week of whatever it is that you do before we come back to another Late Egyptian class, and hopefully finish these uniliterals. Maybe I'll start moving us a little bit faster so we do more than a couple pages a week. I'll try to get off topic less, but I hope you'll enjoy the digressions, because yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff to discuss. So y'all have a great weekend, have a great week, and I will see you all next Saturday at the same time, unless I see you for office hours, which are tomorrow and Wednesday. Okay.
What time tomorrow?
6 p.m. CET. What time zone are you in, George?
Eastern.
Eastern time. So that is noon for you.
Okay.
Okay, I'll see you then. And if anybody wants to come to office hours, support me on Patreon at the advanced student level, and then you will be invited. Thanks, everyone. Have a great one.
Thanks.
Thanks.